Okay, welcome back. The flex container is the parent element that uses the display flex or display inline flex property. Inside this container are the flex items. So here in our index.html file, as you can see, I have deleted everything we had from the last section so we could have a clean slate. Now let's create a container with some items. So here in the body, I will create a container, and inside the container have 4 flex items. I'll use the div times 4. Now let me call this section container, and each of the div item. So, and in my main.scss, let me target the container. Let me give it a border so we could see it clearly. Say 2 pixels, solid red. And I want to give it a height of, say, 10 rem. Okay, that's the container. Because this is a container, I want to set its display to flex. And by setting its display to flex here, what it means is that the flex item will all be arranged horizontally. What makes them arranged horizontally is the property flex direction, which will be row in this case. But because by default, when I set display to flex, I actually don't need to repeat these properties. So I'm going to take it off, but I just want to show it to you that when you set displays to flex, the default behavior is that the flex direction is row, which means that the items will be arranged horizontally along the main axis. So let me take it out. Let me also target the flex item. So I can say container item. I have 4 of them there. So for now, let me give each of them a width of 20%. And I want each of them to stand out. So let me give it a border, 1 pixel, solid blue, so you could see the outline. Let's see what we've got so far. As you see the container as well as the 4 items. Look at that. This is 1, 2, 3, and 4, leaving this space. Now, because each of them is given a width of 20%, 20 times 4 give us 80, so we still have 20% here. Good. Now let's go back to our file. This is the flex container, and we've set the display to flex, which makes those items to, align horizontally one after the other. But there is a gap that is left after the 4th item. So how can I make that gap to be shared among the 4 items? What I need to do is to set the justification. That is, use the property justify content to a couple of values are there. I can have space between, and we'll demonstrate with those values, with all these values, space between. If I give it a save and go check what we've got, refresh, you see that we now have space between adjacent items. All right. So the remaining 20% space is now distributed evenly among the 4 items. Now, I want to give this element, the container, a padding so we could see things clearly. Or let me increase the height. Let me say 100 rep. Now, of course, if I do so, the items will also still take the entire height. Let's check that out. You see that? But that's even too much. Let me reduce it to say to 20 or 30 rep. So, and let me make the height of each of the item height to be equals to say 10. That's a third of the height of the parent. Let's give that a save and check what we've got. Good. So here now you see the flex items individually and the space between them. Now let's check the other value for justify content. Besides space between, of course, I can have space evenly. Let's see how that works. Space evenly, let's see what it gives us. You see that there are spaces left and right of each item. There's a space here, and here at the end. That's space evenly. So depending on what you want to achieve, or depending on the design you're working on, you could use space between or space evenly. Good. Let's see yet another one. We also have, I guess, space around. And with space around, what do we get? You see, it's more or less the same, just about the same thing we get with space evenly. Again, depending on your design, you know what to use. All right, so now let's look at this. Justify content. This with how the elements are arranged along the main axis. And right now, the main axis is this horizontal axis. This is the main axis, like this. Why? This vertical line is the cross axis. If you watch the previous video, you saw this in the illustration. Now, so let's see how we can make these items stay at the center of the cross axis. Right now, this is the cross axis, this height down here. How do we make these flex items stay at the center, that's middle of this flex container? To do that, we have the flex property called align item, and I want it center. Right now, the value is start. So let's check what center gives us. If I refresh, you see that the items stay at the center of the page or of the container. And there are times you want to achieve this sort of effect in your design. So you should know what to use. Now let's look at the third possibility, and align item, I could say end. That should be flex end, not just end. Flex end. Refresh, and you see we have it at the very end. Now let's experiment with flex start, which is the default. At least let's see it. Flex start and refresh. You see, I have it at the very beginning of the flex container vertically. Now, beside the justify content values of space between, space around, and space evenly, we could equally have other value. For example, I could say justify content flex start. And if I do this, let's see what we get. And of course, that's the default value. You see that they all start right at the edge of the container without space between the element. Again, depending on your design, this could be something you want to do. And if I change that value, I could have flex end. And if I check it now, refresh, that gives me flex end, meaning that they are aligned to the end of the container horizontally. And of course, I could have the third value, which is center. And obviously, you know what that one will give us? There you go. It stays at the center. All right. So I could make these things stay at the center horizontally and vertically, which we often do. Now, if I change this one to center also, it means that at the cross axis, the items will stay also at the center. So justify content center, align items center. Again, refresh, and that gives it to us at the center without space in between. So what you notice there is that whenever you want space between the items, you have to either use space between, space around, or space evenly. When you want justification irrespective of gap between the items, then you use flex start, center, and flex end. For the cross axis, when you want alignment, you use flex start, center, and flex end, as we've demonstrated. So these are the properties, the two properties that handle the positioning of your flex item. This is when the display is flex and the flex direction is row. Remember I said earlier that flex direction, when we just say display flex like this, is automatically row. This is what it means. All right. So now let's flip this and make the flex direction column. Because when the flex direction is column, we have to spell it out. In this case now, I will say column. And let's see what we get. Now, but this time around, don't forget that the width is set at 20% initially because I was dealing with items that should be arranged side by side. Now, you can see that the items are arranged vertically down now. And as you see, this vertical direction this time around is the main or primary axis, while the horizontal direction is the cross axis. So in this vertical position now, if I want this flex item to stay at the very start here, what do you think I have to do? Right now, I have it as align items center, but let me do something so that you know how these two properties change depending on the flex direction. Now, in the case of flex direction row, justify content is justifying the content along the horizontal axis, which is the main axis. But this time around, the main axis has become the vertical axis, no longer the horizontal axis. So it means that what justifies the content and place it at the center when you were dealing with flex direction row will be different from what will make it center when you're dealing with flex direction column. If I want the flex item to start from the beginning, it means that this time around, it is align items that will handle that no longer justify content. So if I want the items at the very start, I will use flex start. And this way, if I refresh them, I should have the items stack one on top the other from the start of the container. That is align items. So whenever you want to determine the position of the flex item along the vertical axis, when flex direction is set to column, it is the align items that will give it to you. But when you want to determine where the element will be horizontally, it is justified content that will give it to you. That looks a little tricky. I bet you it is. But with practice, you will master it. Now, so if I want the items to be at the center here, so in this case now, I really don't even need the justified content. So let me comment it out. Okay, go back to our work. Good, you see that it's still at the start of the container. If I put it at the center, of course, as you would expect, it will be at the center of the container. And of course, if I put it at the end, they will be at the end. But this time around, let me increase the height of my container to say 50. And let me reduce the height of these to 5. So when I do this, give it a save. Let's see what happened first. Good. Now my container has increased too much, but let me reduce it so we could see what I'm trying to show you. Let me reduce it to say 40. 40 is okay. Okay. So now you see that we have a lot of gaps here. Now, these gaps we have here means that these items are not vertically centered. Look at it, pay attention. They are not vertically centered, but they are horizontally centered. What that means is that what centers the items when you have flex direction set to column is not align item, but justify content. But don't forget that when flex direction is set to row, justify content is what places it at the center, while align item make it center, left, or right vertically. So if I want these items now to be at the center vertically, I will have to use my justify content. Let me uncomment this now. Refresh. You see that the content now stays at the center vertically and horizontally. So when flex direction is column, it is align items that determine where the item will stay horizontally, while justify content is what determines where it will stay vertically. Pay attention. So here, I can write the comment, vertical position, and here, horizontal position. And that is when flex direction is column. Now, when flex direction is row, it is the opposite of this, which means that align items will position the element vertically or will determine the vertical positioning, while justify content will be responsible for the horizontal position. So this is what you have to master. This is where the trick is, or this is the part of it that's a bit tricky when you start learning the Flexbox. So that's about how you position element horizontally or vertically using the main or cross axis.